What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another War Within video. Hope you're all doing very well. We're on the cusp of season 2. It's happening today, literally. Not the new season isn't starting, but we got this little week in between season 1 and season 2 where nothing's happening. Going to talk about tanks in season 2 and what I've seen on the PTR. We're going to rank them on the tier list, and I'm going to tell you why I'm ranking each tank where I want to rank it. In season 2 of the War Within, I think there's a couple things that are really important. Yo, I really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe on the video. I gotta get some coffee, bye. Of course, tanks need a variety of attributes to like be good, right? They need to have really good threat. Like snap threat is something that you hear people talk about that's like really, really good. Being able to hold threat against the damage of your DPS. They need to do damage themselves. They need utility. They need survivability. They need self-healing, maybe some off-healing. All these kinds of things are important, right? In season 2, in my experience, I've done tons of keys now on the PTR. The most important things that are needed from a tank is self-sustain and utility, especially like crowd control on enemies, being able to stop all these different casts that are going off. There are so many casters in season 2. There's so many enemies that are casting dangerous abilities that need to be interrupted. That's really important. And there are so many healing checks required from a healer's perspective on the rest of my group that the tank needs to be the one that I don't have to worry about ever. If I have to worry about the tank's HP most of the time, while I'm also worrying about everybody else's HP, it's really bad for the healer. So the tank, like 70 to 80% of the time, needs to be able to take care of themselves. So I don't have to think about them, so that I can worry about everybody else's health bars, which are getting crushed by the myriad of AoE damage abilities that are in every dungeon. Every dungeon has these crazy pulsing AoE damage abilities that are kind of annoying, but anyway, that's the big criteria there. So with that context in mind, let's talk about the tanks. I'm going to start with Vengeance, and we're going to put Vengeance in S tier. I mean, you've probably seen this already, but a lot of the other lists, Vengeance is going to go into the S tier. The reason I'm putting Vengeance up here, okay? The reason why everybody else is putting Vengeance in S tier is because of their ability to CC mobs, to stop them from casting really important abilities, and their self-sustain is way better than it's maybe ever been before, right? They have a tier set bonus that procs meta. Meta, a couple patches ago in season 1, got changed so that it now heals the DH as well as giving them max HP, and it heals them for quite a bit. So over the course of a key, you will see a Vengeance DH healing themselves all the time through meta, through these procs that they're getting on meta. And you can see this is a great example of it right here. Everybody's basically at full health, excuse me. Again, from a healing perspective, I don't want to have to think about the tank's health, and I don't in this exact pull. Warp Blood is going off. It's a very dangerous ability. This is one of the pulsing AoE damage abilities. My Vengeance DH's health like barely moves at all. Everybody else's health moves, and I have to worry about that as a healer, but I do not have to worry about my tank, and that is what you want from your tank. That is a huge, huge thing that you want from your tank. Damage-wise, they're also fine. They're doing just as much damage as every other tank. Sometimes they're doing even more. I don't think they're the highest DPS tank in the game, but those two qualities of having AoE CCs on enemies and then having self-sustain, that is really what is going to do it for you. And that's why I think Vengeance DH deserves to go into the S tier. So there's a lot of other good examples I can give you, but I just wanted to show you that one right there. And Vengeance DH absolutely deserves to go to the top of the heap. Okay, Guardian Druid. This is the next one on the list. I'm going to put Guardian Druid in the A+ tier. And I know this sounds ridiculous. This is going to sound ridiculous to some people. I understand. But if you've had some of the experiences that I've had on the PTR with Guardian Druid, I think you'll understand. Number one, the reason that I'm doing this is because Guardian Druid's self-sustain is incredible. It's as good as Vengeance DH, or maybe even better, depending on what talents you're kind of running. They have so many different sources of self-sustain. These big Dream of Cenarius regrowths are massive. You could take After the Wildfire potentially to do some off healing. Talk about that in a second. You have your Frenzied Regens. You have healing from your Moonbear Fury, you know, not Fury of Elune, but Elune's Favor. All the different damage that you're doing is basically arcane damage, right? You turn your Thrash into an arcane damage ability, and you're off to the races. So Their self-sustain is incredible, which again is the most important thing for tanks in my opinion. Their AoE CC is nowhere near as good as Vengeance DH. That is true. They don't have as much sustain there, but they do have really good, other utility. They have things like being able to soothe. They've got the verse buff from Mark of the Wild, which is really good. There's a lot of really great things going on there. They've got, you could do Ursul's and Typhoon. You've got really good off healing, actually, which I think is another major part of the criteria that I think is going to be important. Again, we talk about pulsing damage, and they have actually the ability to heal the rest of your team while the healer is trying to manage the rest of the team as well. There are so many pulsing AoE checks. There's one going off right now. You can see I'm not worried about the Guardian Druid's health, so he's doing just fine. They do not have the same kind of crowd control that a Vengeance DH has, which is why I don't have them in the S tier. And then they also don't have the Vengeance DH buff, which is going to be a magic damage buff. Again, here's another AoE pulse. I just want to highlight all these. This is so ridiculous. These guys do Fan of Knives, which obviously needs to be stunned or crowd controlled in some way. But, the Druid can help with that. He's got his Roar, which is good too. But you've got this Fan of Knives that comes out. There it is right there. Nobody's seeing it, unfortunately. There, he roared right there. You got Fan of Knives, and then you have these big guys that do this pulsing damage as well. There's just so many different sources of pulsing damage in every single dungeon that the healer has to deal with that, again, having some off healing potentially from Guardian Druid, I think could be really helpful in the form of After the Wildfire or those Dream of Cenarius procs. If he doesn't need to use them on himself, he could use them on somebody else. So again, I'm not saying, I know nobody has run After the Wildfire in a long time. I understand that, but I'm just saying it's an option. But again, they do not have the exact same kind of utility that Vengeance does with the AoE silent sigils, and they don't have the magic damage buff that Vengeance DH has, which I think is going to be important for probably the caster meta that we're going to end up seeing, because Vengeance DH is so strong and because Ogvoker is not really going to exist anymore. You're going to have things like Fire Mage and Ellie Shaman and probably Destruction Warlock, or maybe even Athlock now, coming into the S tier to run alongside the Vengeance DH and a Disc Priest. Like, that's kind of the comp you're looking at. So Guardian Druid does have a verse buff. They have a battle res as well, which is really good. Again, they have amazing self-sustain, really good off healing, maybe some of the best off healing in the game, even better than Prot Paladin if they want to spec into it. And then they're very durable. Their damage is also going up with the notes here. If we look at Druid, you can see we'll go to Guardian Druid. Moonfire damage is going up. Mangle damage up. Maul, Raise. Fury of Elune going up by 80%, by the way. The key that I was just showing you, that Guardian Druid in there, his Fury of Elune damage was 4.2% of his damage overall. That's going to go up to like, almost 8. It's going to be like 7% of his damage overall, which is a really big amount of damage. So, they're getting a bunch of buffs on damage as well. I think it's going to be a much better situation than people think it is. And I think with the focus in Season 2 on needing self-sustain, and then potentially off healing for your group, this is where Guardian Druid could kind of kick in and help out a lot. All right, the next one on the list is going to be Blood DK. We're going to put this at the top of A+, a little bit better than Guardian Druid, and I'm going to explain why. Blood DK, of course, has some of the best, probably the best self-sustain in the game. I don't know, it's kind of rivaled these days by like Vengeance DH, in my opinion, and potentially Guardian Druid, but they obviously have an incredible way to just keep themselves alive all the time with Death Strike. If Blood DK is not getting one shot, then they are the best tank in the game because they can always recover with Death Strikes, right? They can always recover. Their damage is also going to be very, very high in Season 2 with the tier set bonus they're getting, which is this Cleaving Death Strike tier set bonus. And you can spec into multiple talents and even an enchant. There's a DK enchant that you can put on that buffs the damage of Death Strike and makes it really, really strong. You can see he's doing 4 million damage per second right now, which is like insane to me. So I think Blood DKs are going to have some of the highest damage in the game, which is a good thing for tanks. That's going to help you with your threat. He's almost doing 5 million. Like, what is this guy doing? I don't even know what he's doing. He's an Ogvoker. I have no idea what he's doing. They have really good self-sustain, which again, I talked about being an important criteria. They have pretty good utility as well when it comes to crowd controlling enemies. You have Gore Fiends if you want to take it. You have 2 charges of regular grip, which is really important. You have Slappy Arms, right? Which is going to be pulling enemies in as well. And whenever you're doing that, you're generating threat on them. You're generating Bone Shield charges. And of course, you're stopping them from casting important abilities. That is really, really good. So Blood DK has some incredible crowd control that way. The ability to stop enemies if needed, which it is needed all the time. And again, their sustain is probably the best in the game. I think that the only issue for them is that they don't offer a, sorry about that, they don't offer like a aura buff, in the sense that they don't have a verse buff or a demon hunter magic damage buff, right? So they're missing some of that, which does kind of suck for them. But again, they have the tools that you need in season 2 to be successful. You can just find those aura buffs somewhere else. And I think their damage is going to be absolutely outrageous. So I would put them in the A tier there, the A plus tier. Sorry, I just lost my list. In the A plus tier, I think they're better than Guardian Druid for sure in terms of what they offer. They do, again, they don't have that aura buff, but just bring a balanced Druid or something, or a Feral, and you'll have that verse buff if you need it. Very, very strong blood decay heading into season 2. I've seen a bunch of them on the PTR, and I've never had to worry about their health bar as a healer. So that to me is the most important thing. I can focus on the 4 other people in my group, including myself, and not have to worry about this tank. Okay, let's talk about Brewmaster. I'm going to put Brewmaster in the A category. Now, I know a lot of people are ranking it like lower than that, but I honest to God feel like people just don't understand Brewmaster. Seriously, they don't really know them that well and don't play them that much, because it's definitely the least played tank. It's almost the least played spec in the entire game. And if you look at Shaw, for example, I'm going to link Shaw down below, by the way. He's a really, really good Brewmaster player. He's doing a plus 15 key right now on the PTR. This is the video of it. Plus 15 Theater of Pain. That's a 15, guys. Like, this is a serious key. This is ridiculous. And watch his shield. Look at his shield right now. This is like a 14 million Celestial Brew that he just pumped out. He doesn't have a Disc Priest giving him shields. Nobody else is giving him shields. That's just him. And it's an absolutely ridiculous. So I think if people understood how to play Brewmaster better, then they might rank it higher, because it is getting a lot more self-sustain in season 2 with things like Master of Harmony plus the tier set bonus. The tier set bonus procs Fortifying Brew, and there's a talent in Master of Harmony that makes Fortifying Brew give you a little bubble, like a shield, every time it activates. So, and the shield is really big. So you can, it ends up equaling like 8 to 10% of your healing overall, and gives you an additional form of self-sustain, which is something that Brewmaster monks are sorely lacking, right? Their ability to sustain themselves has been traditionally pretty low. And so, however, I will say, if you are I'd say the average Brewmaster is going to struggle to stay alive, but a really good Brewmaster is not, because I've seen really good Brewmasters like Shaw in my keys, and I never have to worry about their health bar as a healer. But the bad ones, the majority of the time, you get ones that aren't as good, and you do have to worry about their health bars constantly. And so it's just a difference in experience. But I would say that Brewmaster can be absolutely fine. Look at the damage and healing that he's doing. He's almost doing 2 million HPS. He's doing 3 million DPS on the 4-target cleave there. Like, I just think he was doing even more at the beginning. I think that this is something that people are sleeping on right now. And I think that if you go watch Shaw and watch him play, he's doing absolutely crazy amounts of damage and healing. Now, they also bring Mystic Touch, so for a physical damage composition, they're very, very good to have a Brewmaster, right? They have decent CC, but not as good as Blood Decay, not as good as an AoE Silence from a Vengeance DH. So they have things like, Ring of Peace and an AoE leg sweep. Those things are good. Paralyze can be good. But at the end of the day, they just don't have as much crowd control as some of the other tanks. Excuse me. And then their aura buff is not as useful as like a versatility buff or a magic damage buff, right? Most people in the game deal magic damage, not physical damage. So if you can construct a composition around a Brewmaster Monk, then it's really good. But again, for those reasons, I think it does fall to the A tier. I think it's being slept on, though, in a big way. And I think Brewmaster deserves to probably get more love than it's getting right now. Okay, last two, we got Paladin. We're going to put Paladin in the S tier. Once again, I think this is common knowledge at this point, but Paladin's like snap threat, AoE silence on multiple enemies at the same time, that kind of stuff makes them really, really potent, and their damage and healing are also just as good as any of the other tanks. This is a really crazy pull. I just wanted to show you here that we were all going to die, but the tank actually managed to live for a while. This is a pretty tough pull. You have to deal with all the detonates, but the healing from Prot Paladin is also very strong, with the potential, like Guardian Druid, to have exceptional off healing. They can actually keep the rest of their team alive as well. Things like Lay on Hands, Blessing of Sacrifice is really good to help somebody stay alive, or to avoid a one-shot, right? You can save somebody's life. You can Blessing of Spell Warding, Blessing of Protection. You have all this extra utility, which is really, really good. You can have an AoE interrupt with the blind, or the in cap, sorry. But the reality is their CC, like the the utility they give to their team is very good. The utility they have in terms of crowd controlling enemies is not as good as some of the other tanks, but except for their Avenging Shield stopping the kicks, which is really good. So you have an AoE Avenger Shield with Divine Toll, right? And then you have a regular Avenger Shield, which resets its own cooldown constantly. And that is going to provide you with an enormous amount of stopping power on enemy spellcasts, which is a huge deal in Season 2. It's really important. So for that reason, I think they deserve to go S tier. And their defensive package is just really good. They have a lot of defense, a lot of cooldowns they can use, and their damage is really good as well. So I think Prot Pally deserves to go into the S tier. They have a battle res. They've got the stops for the enemies. They have self-sustain, which is the most important tank quality in my opinion. You don't have to worry about them as a healer. They have a lot of really good things going on, and I think they absolutely deserve to be up here. Okay, that brings us to Warrior, which is the last one. I'm going to put it in the A tier right now. I don't actually have any footage of one. I didn't have too many Warriors in my keys on the PTR, but I'm putting it in A tier because they are the tank that lacks the most self-sustain and the most utility of all the tanks, right? They have things like Shockwave, which is really nice. You could take Intimidating Shout, but like, I don't, nobody ever does that. So you basically have Shockwave and then Stormbolt as your CC. You can stun people as well with one of your charges, of course, with Shield Charge. But at the end of the day, the amount of crowd control and enemy stops that you have compared to other tanks is really abysmal. So you can't fill in that role, which I think kind of sucks. Your self-sustain is fine, but it's definitely worse than every other tank, right? You have things like Victory Rush and Ignore Pain all the time that you can be casting, but they're not as good as these other healers in terms of actually staying alive. Once a warrior's HP bar starts dropping below like 50%, you're in big trouble. You have to heal them big time. As a healer, that's not really tenable in Season 2. There are so many AoE damage checks that you have to deal with that you just don't have time to get your warrior back up to full health as well. So I'm a little worried about Warrior for sure. Their damage is exceptional, and I know there's been videos going around of them out DPSing other DPS right now. I understand that, but strictly, in my point of view, in the higher level keys, the most important qualities that a tank needs is that ability to keep themselves alive and the ability to stop enemy spellcasts, and Warrior is the worst at doing all of those things. So I think it deserves to go down in the A tier below Brewmaster. Brewmaster has a lot more utility compared to Warrior, but Warrior does have an enormous amount of damage and does bring that physical attack damage buff, so you can build around it if you want to build a physical damage comp as well. It does have some good things going for it, but at the end of the day, the qualities that I think are the most important for tanks, it does not have. Okay, there's your list, guys. I think these are the tanks. Again, just a TLDR, or not a TLDR, but a little, disclaimer. I think that you could bring any of these tanks to any of your keys and you could time a +12. I have timed +12 keys on the PTR with every single one of these tanks, okay? It's doable. It's possible. It's just, I think that in Season 2, you're really going to be relying on the tanks that have the ability to keep themselves alive so that you never have to worry about them as a healer. I'm telling you, that is the most important thing, and you're going to notice it when you have to worry about a tank's HP bar versus when you don't. Okay, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you so much again for watching. I love you guys. I'll see you in the next one.